thought I'd go deeper into what I was talking about the other day. So, in terms of the whole, like I said, try and stay open minded. Whenever I do videos, my point and my purpose is to get people to think outside of what they've been conditioned to think. And I do this in a lot of ways. I do this with veganism, I do this with astrology and spirituality. Pretty much all avenues of my views on things are very much about considering other possibilities. Again, I can explain why I'm like this in human design, astrology, and even numerology. It's just we all have our purpose, we all have our reason for being here, we all have our special gifts, and this is just one of mine. So I use it, and I try and help people in a more supported kind of way, because I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. I'm trying to remember the correct quote, and I'm sorry, I only just thought of it now. That's why it's come up, so I apologize if I don't get it quite right. But what he basically was saying is that you can't conquer hate with more hate. You can only overcome hate with love. And I agree with this strongly. So, I personally think there's really only two categories. And I love to simplify things. I think it's because I'm incredibly autistic. And I just see things in a more simple way. I mean, I'm very complex, and I have very complex thoughts and feelings and whatever. But I like to explain things in a more simplified way because it makes it a little bit easier to absorb it, I guess. And I try where I can to alleviate any threat or an attack or anything that could come out of it. Obviously, I'm not perfect, but I try. I try to put things in a nice way. It's a little bit more accommodating and more empathetic, I guess, would be a good way to put it. Anyways, I think everything fits in these two categories. And I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it here. I can't remember, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's relevant. But everything comes down to, is it fear or is it love? Now, I know I probably should have said hate, and you might have thought that's a bit of a strange thing to say, but I don't actually think so. I think deep down under hate is fear. I think that's where you get down to the very, very base of it. It's either you're afraid or you feel love. So anxiety, depression, anger, hate, all of these fit under fear. All of them. Love, it's acceptance, empathy, inclusion. These are all love. So the only way you can trump those, I shouldn't say that word, ever since, who is in charge in a certain place. Now that word, I feel like I don't like using it as much anymore in this way. But the only way you can overcome fear and hate and all the things that fit underneath that umbrella is by showing love, support, and care. So that's what I'm trying to do with with this topic. That's how I was helped into making this decision in my life, and I'm really being serious when I say that, when I say what I'm about to say. I am so grateful to this person. It's been years, and it's something I'll never be able to repay, ever. And I am incredibly grateful because it's changed my life in the best ways possible. It created all kinds of new directions, and I think it's a big part of why I've pursued what I'm doing now. I've been able to make certain connections that I wasn't able to make before. So I'm incredibly grateful. And that's why I talk about health a lot. I talk about the impact on what doing this actually does to human beings and the planet itself and the animals involved, of course. That's the biggest. It really is. And like I said, this is the difference. People get confused about the word vegan. And like I said, it's really nothing to do with the diet at all. It is simply making sure where possible to make the best decisions that cause the least amount of impact and cruelty on both ourselves, other human beings, the planet, and the animals themselves. That's really all it is. When it comes to the diet side, the plant-based diet. That's why I think this can be such a difficult thing for people to grasp. But, I thought it's come up to my head, so I'm gonna talk about it. But it's like one of those situations when people first, I've seen loads of videos like this. So when people become parents, and this is the part that's so, I guess, interesting, and you can kind of see it happen in real time. I'm not saying all children react this way, but I think there's a twinge, there's a twinge, and you can see it in adults through little random things, and I'll give you those examples in a minute, but I'm going to give you this first one. Just a little thing to think about. A lot of times when children see like the whole body of an animal that's going to be used for food, like I said, I don't think of it as food. I don't think it is food, and it definitely isn't food for human beings, but I'm going to say that because that's what people think of it as. But you can see a lot of times the look on their faces, some of them start crying. Some of them are deeply disgusted or heartbroken or whatever. And so you can see it. Human beings in our natural state, when we haven't been corrupted or marketed to or conditioned out of our empathy, we're not comfortable with it. We're really not. And so you can see that in children. A lot of times, that's the betrayal. That's where a lot of vegans get angry, especially at the start. It's the betrayal of the understanding that at one stage you could see that this was wrong. You could feel the empathy for these animals, and it wasn't something that you were okay with. But you were conditioned and marketed and taught by your parents that this is food and this is what we're doing and blah, 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 blah. And so over time, you kind of shut your eyes to it. You switch off your empathy in this area. And that's what's so interesting with the brain. When we do repetitive patterns, repetitive thought forms, it creates new neural pathways in the brain. Like I said, the brain, and I don't know if you guys have heard of this term, but it's called neuroplasticity. This is not a new term, but it's the whole concept that these neural pathways are very, very flexible and they can change. But again, a person has to be open to that. Now, this is where I guess we could put astrology into the mix. If you have mutable signs, for instance, in your Mercury areas, or I would probably say Mars is another one, or signs that have to do with a strong feeling of injustice. If you have these signs in these areas, you're probably going to be a little bit more sensitive and a bit more aware. And it will be easier for you to change your mind because it's not fixed. This is an area where it's really, really good to have these types of signs because it makes it that much easier for you to grasp the concepts of, yes, even though I was raised this way, it doesn't mean that it's the best for me, for the environment, and for anyone else. And that's why I think sometimes, when we start to add these complexities to the picture, we can put more pieces together in the puzzle, and that's a better thing, right? So back to what I was saying before, in terms of, you can see that human beings are meant to be deeply emotional, empathetic beings. I want to give you some examples, once again, like I did with the children and seeing animals' bodies and being very disturbed by it. When human beings see animals that they don't see as food, right? Or at least typically. A lot of times I've seen it where there's been like a shark that's been washed up on shore at the beach. Or there's a deer whose foot has gotten caught, a hoof, I should say, gotten caught in a fence, right? Now, this is where it shows our instincts are not the same as an omnivore or a carnivore. Like I said, we don't have the same instincts. And the way you can see this is a true omnivore and carnivore, sometimes they go weeks without eating. Number one, we can't do that. Well, at least not unless we're really, really monitored. And that's like if there's weight problems or some kind of disease like cancer, fasting is a really useful tool to kill cancer cells. But if we're not talking about those types of isolated situations, and again, these people aren't moving, They're not doing much, right? That sort of long-term period fasting, yeah, you need a long-term period where you're not doing anything either, and you're monitored by doctors. Like, this is quite a specific. On average, human beings can't go that long without eating. Whereas omnivores and carnivores, they can. Now, back to my original point. If a true omnivore or a carnivore saw an animal trapped and injured, they would eat it. They wouldn't save it. They would go, oh, great. They're weak and they're sick. I'm gonna take this because it's a meal, and I don't have to work too hard for it now because I'm hungry anyways. This is not how human beings act. Even if you were to see like a cow or a pig or whatever stuck in a fence, you still wouldn't go over and eat it. You know what I mean? I mean, unless you have some sort of like butchering skills or something, and you know how to deal with this animal. Like, you're not going to go run over to it and start, using your fingers and your herbivore teeth to start trying to chew into that. That's my point, right? We don't have these instincts. So it shows, unless it's been prepared, heavily seasoned by plant materials, we don't actually salivate or crave meat because we're not supposed to be eating it. That's the truth. We're not supposed to be eating it. So there are incredible things that happen. Again, the human body is a very resilient system, and it is designed for survival, like all beings. So, can we live on eating this stuff? Yes. Are we at our optimum? No. And we're not at our optimum from a mental point of view, an emotional point of view, an empathetic point of view, a physical point of view. Like, there's no positives to eating this stuff. Because it's not really food. Not for human beings anyways. So, the top 4 diseases that make human beings sick are cancer, which is a large amount of this is from eating animal fats and high sugar. Like, that's what cancer cells will multiply and kind of even zombify, I guess would be a good way to put it, to create cancer cells. And then, of course, it creates cancer in that area of the body and how the body responds to that. And again, like highly carcinogenic animal products. So, cooking meat, stuff like this is definitely going to increase those odds, which of course you don't want. Diabetes is type 1 and type 2 are linked to dairy, so that's not going to help you much. Stroke and heart disease, those are the other 2. Those are also linked from high animal fat, which clogs up the arteries, both to the brain and to the heart. Now, again, the body is an incredible survival mechanism, so it will create little other pathways, but it creates a lot of pressure, and eventually it will lead to stroke and heart attack in some description, or like I said, one of these other diseases that are kind of break-offs of these major ones. So there's really no benefit. We're hurting and creating animals that we don't need to in numbers that are just astronomical on both the planet, the animals themselves, and ourselves. And for what? It makes us sick anyway. It doesn't make any logical sense. So that's why I thought I'd bring this up, and the understanding to get your head around the fact that we, as a society, we become addicted to this stuff like we have with highly processed sugar and refined foods and junky stuff. It's exactly the same as eating animal products. None of these things are good for us. They're all toxic for the body. They're toxic and painful and, incredibly cruel to the animals and to the planet. So I that's why I want to make content like this, so that you remain open and understand that there's all kinds of studies and research on what I'm saying. I'm not making this up. This is a consistent truth about the human body and about health, about life, and about empathy. And look, I do hear, and I might go into this in another video, but I do hear people talking about not wanting to have as much empathy. Like, there's been studies about Botox. You know, injecting Botox can start affecting your emotional, well, your empathetic part of your brain. And some people think this is a good thing to shut this off, but it isn't. Because empathy is what helps us connect to each other. And like I said, to the animals and to the planet. And this is a really important part of human beings. And I think, yeah, we can go into the more corrupt version of ourselves, but we're not happy, we're not healthy, we don't look good, we don't feel good. Like, none of this stuff is good, right? Or we can lean into our more empathetic nature, where we are more altruistic, more inclusive of others, and we become happier, we look better, we feel better. So yeah, I thought I would bring that up. I will make more videos about this and other stuff. I'm going to focus mainly on health and things like this for YouTube, for here. But I'll talk about astrology and human design and stuff. I can go into much deeper detail here. I can make longer videos. I haven't been making like really, really long videos because I don't know if people actually want to see that. But I've just been trying to go a little bit longer to talk about some heavier topics. Because at the end of the day, my focus, my dream, my purpose, I think, from what I can see, is, again, helping people make better decisions, not just for themselves, but for everybody else too. And for our species, for the planet, and for the other animals on this planet as well. There are many things that we could do to create a fairly decent impact, to improve things, to improve the health of our planet. To improve the health of ourselves and to the animals themselves. And it's just a matter of us joining together and being brave enough to work on these things and to put them as a priority. And then we can all become superhuman versions of ourselves, because that's what eating like this does. That's why I think it's the best thing that I ever did. Definitely. Anyway, I'll talk more about lots of other topics soon, and I hope that it helped you open your eyes a little bit and just be open to the possibility. You don't have to make any crazy changes now. Like, this is kind of a major thing. But whatever you can do to move yourself this direction and reduce the cruelty that you both impact on yourself and on others, I promise you the happier you'll become.